Welcome to Stories with Liz. I thought it would be fun to look at some myths around creation, the creation of the universe. Starting with Thomas Bulfinch and his interpretation of the story of Prometheus and Pandora. Before earth and sea and heaven were created, all things were one aspect, to which we give the name of chaos. A confused and shapeless mass, nothing but dead weight, in which, however, slumbered the seeds of things. Earth, sea, and air were all mixed up together, so the earth was not solid, the sea was not fluid, and the air was not transparent. God and nature at last interposed and put an end to this discord, separating the earth from sea and heaven from both. The fiery part, being the lightest, sprang up and formed the skies. The air was next in weight and place, the earth being heavier sank below, and the water took the lowest place and buoyed up the earth. Here some god, it is not known which, gave his good offices in arranging and disposing the earth. He appointed rivers and bays their places, raised mountains, stooped out valleys, distributed woods, fountains, fertile fields, and stony plains. The air being cleared, the stars began to appear, fishes took possession of the sea, birds of the air, and four-footed beasts of the earth. But another animal was wanted, and man was made. It is not known whether the Creator made him of divine materials, or whether in the earth, so lately separated from heaven, there lurked still some heavenly seeds. Prometheus took some of this earth, and kneading it up with water, made man in the image of the gods. He gave him an upright stature, so that while all other animals turn their face downwards and look at the earth, he raises his to heaven and looks at the stars. Prometheus was one of the Titans, a gigantic race, who inhabited the earth before men. To him and his brother Epimetheus was committed the office of making man and providing him and all other animals with the faculties necessary for their preservation. Epimetheus undertook to do this, and Prometheus was to overlook his work when it was done. Epimetheus accordingly proceeded to bestow upon the different animals the various gifts of courage, strength, swiftness, sagacity, wings to one, claws to another, a shelly covering to a third, etc. But when man came to be provided for, who was supposed to be superior to all other animals, Epimetheus had been so prodigal of all his resources that he had nothing left to bestow upon man. In his perplexity, he resorted to his brother Prometheus, who, with the aid of Minerva, went up to heaven and lighted his torch at the chariot of the sun, and brought down fire to man. With this gift, man was more than a match for all other animals. It enabled him to make weapons wherewith to subdue them, tools to which to cultivate the earth, to warm his dwelling, so as to be comparatively independent of climate, and finally to introduce the arts and to coin money, the means of trade and commerce. Woman was not yet made. The story, absurd enough, is that Jupiter made her and sent her to Prometheus and his brother to punish them for their presumption in stealing fire from heaven and men for accepting the gift. The first woman was named Pandora. She was made in heaven, every god contributing something to perfect her. Venus gave her beauty, Mercury persuasion, Apollo music, etc. Thus equipped, she was conveyed to earth and presented to Epimetheus, who gladly accepted her, though cautioned by his brother to be aware of Jupiter and his gifts. Epimetheus had in his house a jar in which were kept certain nauseous articles, for which, in fitting man for his new abode, he had had no occasion. Pandora was seized with an eager curiosity to know what this jar contained, and one day she slipped off the cover and looked in. Forthwith there escaped a multitude of plagues for heedless men, such as gout, rheumatism, and colic for his body, and envy, spite, and revenge for his mind, and scattered themselves far and wide. Pandora hastened to replace the lid, but alas, the whole content of the jar had escaped, one thing only excepted, which lay at the bottom, and that was hope. So we see at this day, wherever evil are abroad, hope never entirely leave us. And while we have that, no amount of ills can make us completely wretched. Another story is that Pandora was sent in good faith by Jupiter to bless men, that she was furnished with a box containing her marriage present, in which every god had put some blessing. She opened the box incautiously, and the blessings all escaped, hope only excepted. This story seems more probable than the former, for how could hope, so precious a jewel as it is, have been kept in a jar full of all manners of evil, as suggested in the previous story? The world being thus furnished with inhabitants, the first age was an age of innocence and happiness, called the Golden Age. Truth and pride prevailed, though not enforced by law, nor was there any magistrate to threaten or punish. The forest had not yet been robbed of its trees to furnish timbers for vessels, nor had men built fortifications round their towns. There were no such things as swords and spears and helmets. The earth brought forth all things necessary for man, without his labor in ploughing or sowing. Perpetual spring reigned, flowers sprang up without seeds, the rivers flowed with milk and wine, and yellow honey distilled from the oaks. Then succeeded the Silver Age, inferior to that of the Golden, but better than that of the Bronze. Jupiter shortened the spring and divided the year into seasons. Then first men had to endure the extremities of heat and cold, and houses became necessary. Caves were the first dwellings, and leafy coverts of the woods, and huts woven of twigs. Crops would no longer grow without planting. The farmer was obliged to sow the seeds, and toiling ox to draw the plough. Next came the Brazen Age, more savage of temper, and readier to the strife of arms, yet not altogether wicked. The hardest and worst was the Iron Age. Crime burst in like a flood, modesty, truth, and honor fled. In their places came fraud and cunning, violence, and wicked love of gain. Then seamen spread sails to the wind, and the trees were torn from the mountains to serve for keels to ships, and vexed the face of the ocean. The earth, which till now had been cultivated in common, began to be divided into possession. Men were not satisfied with what surface produced, and must dig into its bowels, and draw forth from thence the ores of metals. Mischievous iron and more mischievous gold were produced. War sprang up, using both as weapons. The guest was not safe in his friend's house, and sons-in-laws and fathers-in-laws, brothers and sisters, husbands and wives, could not trust one another. Sons wished their fathers dead, that they might come to the inheritance. Family love lay prostrate. The earth was wet with slaughter, and the gods abandoned it one by one, till Astrea alone was left, and finally she also took her departure. Jupiter, seeing the state of things, burned with anger. He summoned the gods to council. They obeyed the call and took the road to the palace of heaven. The road, which one may see in a clear night, stretched across the face of the sky, and it is called the Milky Way. Along the road stands the palace of the illustrious gods. The common people of the skies live apart on either side. Jupiter addressed the assembly. He set forth the frightful condition of things on the earth, and closed by announcing his intention to destroy the whole of its inhabitants, and provide a new race, unlike the first, who would be more worthy of life, and much better worshippers to the gods. So saying, he took a thunderbolt, and was about to launch it at the world, and destroy it by burning. But, recollecting the danger that such a conflagration might set heaven itself on fire, he changed his plan, and resolved to drown it. The north wind, which scattered the clouds, was chained up, the south was set out, and soon covered all the face of the heaven with a cloak of pitchy darkness. The clouds driven together resounded with a crash. Torrents of rain fell, the crops are laid low, the year's labor of the husbandman perishes in an hour. Jupiter, not satisfied with his own waters, called on his brother Neptune to aid him with his. He let loose the rivers and pours them all over the land. At the same time, he heaves the land with the earthquake and brings in the reflux of the ocean over the shores. Flocks, herds, men, and houses are swept away, and temples with their sacred enclosures profaned. If any edifice remained standing, it was overwhelmed, and its turrets lay hid behind the waves. Now all was sea without shore. Here and there an individual remained on a projecting hilltop, and a few in boats pulled the oar where they had lately driven the plough. The fish swam among the treetops. The anchor is let down into a garden, where the graceful lambs played but now, unwieldy sea calves gambol. The wolf swims among the sheep, the yellow lion and tiger struggle in the water. The strength of the wild bear saves him not, nor his swiftness the stag. The birds fall with weary wings into the water, having found no land for resting place. Those living beings whom the water spared fell a prey to hunger. Pronossus alone of all the mountains overtopped the waves, and there Deucalion and his wife Pyrrha, of the race of Prometheus, found refuge, he a just man, and she a faithful worshipper of the gods. Jupiter, when he saw none left alive but this pair, he remembered their harmless lives and previous demeanor, ordered the north wind to drive away the clouds, and disclosed the skies to earth, and earth to the skies. Neptune also directed Triton to blow on his shell, and sound a retreat to the waters. The waters obeyed, and the sea resounded its shores, and the rivers to their channels. Then Deucalion thus addressed Pyrrha: "O wife, only surviving woman, joined to me first by ties of kindred and marriage, and now by a common danger. Would that we possessed the power of our ancestor Prometheus, and could renew the race as he first made it. But as we cannot, let us seek yonder temple, and inquire the gods what remains for us to do." They entered the temple, deformed as it was with slime, and approached the altar, where no fire burned. There they fell prostrate on the earth, and prayed the goddess to inform them how they might retrieve their miserable affairs. The oracle answered: "Depart from the temple with heads veiled and garments unbound, and cast behind you the bones of your mother." They heard the words with astonishment. Pyrrha first broke silence. "We cannot obey. We dare not profane the remains of our parents." They sought thickest shades of the wood, and revolved the oracle in their minds. At length Deucalion spoke: "Either the sagacity deceives me, or the command is one we may obey without impiety. The earth is the great parent of us all. The stones are her bones. These we may cast behind us, and I think it is this that the oracle means. At least, it will do no harm to try." They veiled their faces, unbound their garments, and picked up stones and cast them behind them. The stones, wonderful to relate, began to grow and assume shape. By degrees, they put on a rude resemblance of the human form, like a block half finished in the hands of the sculptor. The moisture and slime that were about them became flesh, the stony part became bones, the veins remained veins, retaining their name, only changing their hues. Those thrown by the hand of the man became men, and those thrown by the hand of the woman became women. And it was a hard race, and well adapted to labor, as we find ourselves to be at this day. given plain indication to our origin. The end of that myth of creation. Maybe we'll look into another type of myth of creation next time we do mythology. Stick around to find out. Bye for now.